sort of a conventional looking character. Right? All I'm going to do, if you're comfortable, shaking hands, okay? All right. All right. What are you experiencing in this moment? What are you experiencing?
Connection.
Yeah. The only other person I want you to connect with, actually I'm going to say two. I want you to look at your dad. I want you to sense he's there. Do you know Kim at all?
No.
All right. Take a look over there. Is she somebody you would ever want to have coach you? So just make a connection real quick.
Definitely.
What are you experiencing right now?
Weird.
It's weird, but what else? Do you like it, or is it weird bad?
Well, now it's a little bit, I feel a little bit more open that I'd be able to say, hey, yeah, coach me,
All right.
without having the attachment.
I'm going to step out a sec, because I'm a sports psychologist. He's more of a physical game coach. I just want you to shake hands with her and meet her for a second, all right? Do you mind?
No, I'm good. Hi, I'm Kim. Nice to meet you, Ken.
So if you had a chance to throw some shots, maybe you can take a peek, or maybe if you have some on your phone, you can just send it over to her and she could take a look. Would that be all right? All right.
It's always the opportunity.
All right. What are you experiencing right now?
I'll feel a little bit more comfortable with being female.
All right. What happened to all those people? Y'all disappeared.
Chopped liver.
What's that?
Chopped liver.
Chopped liver. Chopped liver. All right. Give her a hand. You can get down off the table.
I always, especially when I have younger girls that I'm working with, I try to convey to them that you have to be comfortable. If you want to be good in a sport, you have to be comfortable being seen. And it was probably one of the hardest things for me because I was a pretty shy kid. And I thrown on Team USA and they're like, go up there and speak. Go over here and do this. And I was like, I just want to bowl. But you have to be okay with being watched because the better you get, the more they're going to watch you, the more they're going to ask you to say things and be this and be that. You have to be okay with it.
I couldn't even emphasize it better. Which is, if you're going to be successful, you'll be seen. What allows you to go into foreign environments safely is figuratively holding hands. Everybody's better in a dark basement with somebody else, especially if you can outrun them. But when it's us, it's like, you're not being seen. What happened, like you said, the room becomes, as you said, chopped liver, because we're in relationship. And now you're not being seen, you're just being seen. Coach V or Dell's kids or any others, they're being seen by you, and if the relationship's right, and Susie's out there with her players, that's who the person's being seen by, not the TV audience or where else it might be. Now, this is odd. This is still in the sins category. Like, what? Focusing on winning isn't that what we're about? It's like, yeah, when you're practicing. Focusing on winning drives the good, I guess if you want to call it perfectionism, that says, I'd like to win, maybe a lot. That's what drives practice, and that's what drives staying when your hands are sore, and that's what gets you going. That's what has you stretch when you don't want to stretch, because it's what makes winning happen. Focusing on winning would be like standing in the 10th and saying, focus on a double. I don't even know how to do that. I know how to breathe, I know how to get here, I know how to have maybe one or two key thoughts, but I don't know how to focus on filling the 10th. It's a lot of things. Again, back to the talk this morning with Coach Borden, which is one thing. That's all you have. But focusing on winning is this amorphous, approval-seeking, status, ego-based thing that I don't mind having an ego, but enjoy it later. It's not like it's an evil part. It's just a part you don't want steering the car at certain times. And being in a tournament thinking, I got to win, or I got to have this title, or I've got to have this money, or I've got to look good for you, is crushing. Focusing on winning drives practice. Focusing on winning in the moment of competition is almost always fear-based. Because winning in the moment of competition matters to your ego. awesome feeling of executing wonderfully is your spirit. And you have to have that with the women you work with straight, or they won't have it straight. If there's anything else you want to say about that?
No, I just think when your motivation is fear, it's short term, and it is, and I think you find that your players begin to resent you for it. So make sure how you're motivating them, because we see it all the time. You know, if you don't do it this way, you're not going to play. If you don't do it this way, you're not going to travel. And it doesn't work. And they lose faith in you. And you, in the end, you lose the connection with the player.
All right. I have to take a peek because I know at some point we'll say you guys have to stop now. Oh, we're great. So there's a whole, I don't know how much left. We're good. So, fire away. Right? Now, if somehow I talk enough, disseminate enough information, and talk, if I just keep piling it on, you'll get better. And we know this about athletes. This will sound odd. And again, we're starting with a baseline of a room full of people who know a lot about bowling. But if you, whether you're giving private instruction, whether you're running a college team, whether you're running Team USA, if you listen 80% of the time and talk 20, if that were the only thing we measured, your athletes would rate you as a superior coach. But far and away, traditional coaching models in every sport, from baseball to basketball to golf to coaching, is reversed, which is I talk 80% of the time and listen 20 or less. And the question earlier was, what gets people to change? And people do not change, typically, unless one of two things happens. One is you have aversive consequences. If something feels bad, you change. The other is this. You will change for a coach when you feel like they understand what you are experiencing. And most women, sorry to tell you this, guys, think you don't know what they experience. At the physical level, what their body feels like. At the emotional level, what it's like to be afraid, or vulnerable, or to fail publicly. Very few psychologists listen. This will sound odd, but when we look at tapes and transcripts of psychologists, what's your job supposed to be? They talk and give advice more than they listen. And the same data is true for psychologists. Their patients rate them more highly when they listen more. And real listening is like this. Are we okay here?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I have something to say. I'm going to say it in a minute.
All right. You think about it like this. Those of you who are ever had musicians, you know what a tuning fork is. Say you have something middle C, you ring a little fork, and it goes, middle C, that's me. All right? If you hold a solid fork up to that tuning fork, not a lot happens. The tuning fork goes, you don't get me. In tuning fork language. If you hit a tuning fork and you hold another one close to it that's of the same pitch or tone, it will start to vibrate without doing anything to it but holding it by the other tuning fork. Does this make sense? This one sets this one off. That's called empathy. Okay? And the first tuning fork goes, oh, you get it. And when there is the experience of empathy, which is you get what it's like to be me, then my suggestions for change have ultimate credibility. Because I get where you're starting from, let's move you to here. But if an athlete thinks you don't even get what it's like to be in my body or my emotions or my psychology, you don't even get it, then you're just disseminating advice. And the old coaching mythology is if I just tell you the right stuff, you'll get better. We've tried that model. It's not great. You will listen your way into your female athlete's success. Because then they'll speak, you'll listen. They'll have the experience of connection, tuning fork, And then your advice or coaching tips or knowledge will be incredibly credible. Because they get that you get them. And this seems so basic, but most coaching is the opposite. Go ahead.
To speak to that, working here at the training center, and I give majority of the lessons, Brian, is awesome because those that I can't. And I find myself, when I have a student here for 3 hours, 6 hours, just constantly going. And I remember feeling like I wanted to give them everything I had. I didn't want to feel like I was holding back anything. It seemed unfair. If they're paying, I should give them all I can to make them better. And I feel like, and I've always felt like that was a little bit of a weakness in my coaching style, because they would become overwhelmed. And the times where, I feel like I sit and I listen, and that's what you have the opportunity to do in a lot of cases when you have your national team, when you have your students over time, is you can take the time to properly give them the information in kind of a logical manner, and also take the time to listen to what they're feeling and what they want to have happen in their game and in their future. The years that I've worked with Dean, I remember, I first, we met on the phone, we talked, and I witnessed saw him in an environment like this, where he's doing a workshop, full of energy, up on the table, doing this, doing that, and then I went to his office, and completely different experience. Just uncomfortably quiet, where I'm like, what? How does that make you feel? Like when he was talking with you, and that was like the worst thing I ever wanted to come out of his mouth. I'm like, what? I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. I'm sure he was tired of that because he was just asking over and over and over. So I wouldn't put language to it.
And I felt like she was the highest authority on what she actually thought and felt.
But I don't know. They have to know you care before they care what you know. One of my favorites. And it doesn't matter what field you're working in. You can be an executive upstairs. If you want people to follow you, they have to believe that you care about the outcome, about their future, about them as people.
And if you have somebody you're dreading working with, one of two things is happening. One, you just dread working with them. That can't work over time. Because who wants to hang out with somebody that doesn't want to hang out with them? And you're not going to feel safe for that player. You're not going to want to learn from them. The other thing is this, and be careful of this, sort of hot tip. If you're really not looking forward to being with somebody, they're probably selling that everywhere, which is called reject me. Again, remember I said people have playing cards and they play them everywhere. You've got to be careful whether somebody's seductive, whether somebody's angry, whether somebody's aversive. They're selling a way of being. And you have to not buy what they're selling. Somebody's going to close the deal, you or them. It's always going to be closed. You're either going to buy into the invitation. Sometimes it's an appropriate invitation, which is I'm really here to learn, or whatever it is. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. And sometimes people who have histories, people want to achieve in sports sometimes because they've had painful histories in other places. And they will sell to you, let's repeat what happened to me before. Called whatever, abuse, boundary violation, insult, ridicule. You'll often be invited into a repeat performance. It happens a lot. But the unwavering, no. Care about you, care what happens to you. The unwavering path, well, like I say, it's the vitamin C. It cures so much. We're seeing.
Reaching the comfort zone.
Which we just sort of did with you.
Men will drive over curbs to get where they're going. Once women find success in what they're doing, they won't leave it, whether it's technique, lane play, or competition competition attitude. Of course. And I touched on this a little bit earlier on, but sometimes it's tricky to get them to go outside of what they're comfortable with.
Even at the physical level, lofting the gutter is much more enjoyable for one gender than the other, typically. And sometimes it's what to be done. Playing the twig is much more comfortable sometimes for one gender than the other. Big body movement, whatever it is. Everybody cracks their head on the ceiling of their comfort zone. And your job as a coach is to say, hey, come with it. We're going to go a little further than that. But again, the strength of your relationship is what will, let's say, all right, so I'm going to come up by myself. You're the crash mat, you're the hand, you're the one that's on belay in climbing terms. Let's say we're going to move this way, or we're going to play over there, or even we're going to think this way. There's a marvelous book out there called Leaning In, written by a high-level woman executive. It says, in business, women have it all. Foresight, planning, verbal skills, intelligence, all of it. And this woman says, but they don't close the deal because their self-concept is if I take this, I'm taking from somebody else. And I'm acting like, I'll use a term, it's a sort of off-color language, but another woman executive told me this. We watched a man's behavior in terms of closing sort of a deal. And the guy was a jerk, but he got it done. And I'm not saying anyone should be a jerk, but the guy did it in a way that wasn't pretty. The woman said to me, she goes, look at all these people admiring this guy. He said it, and she said, I did it, I'm a castrating bitch. But he can do it, and he's called successful and rich and whatever it is. And so what happens in the comfort zone mentality of, if I go take it, the Carolyns and the Kelly Kulicks of the world who say, it's my turn, I get to have it. A lot of women are unwilling to think that way. It is outside of what's comfortable for them to do, even as a self-concept. And it's a gender difference. And there has to be permission. And if your relationship is solid enough, you're the one that creates permission. Even for how people are allowed to think without thinking they're ugly inside. Anything more about that?
No, I just think, and some of you have coached in different countries, that's not your home country, and trying to get an understanding of different cultures and what comes naturally in Latin America versus in Europe. All of these things are important to understand with your athletes. You can't just walk in and be who you are at home and expect that to work everywhere. You have to learn the cultures and figure out how to maneuver so that you can get this out of your players.
I just like this one. Remember I said people ask the wrong questions. What if I screw up? What if I look stupid? What if I'm dumb? What if I miss? And I love this quote from Carrie, which is, no woman had ever won a Megabucks tournament in Vegas before. And her question was, what do I need to know? What's going to happen here? It's the right question. What do I have to do now? Sometimes it's a ball change, sometimes it's a lane play thing, and sometimes it's saying, what's going to make the best pillow here? What's going to bring it all? That's the right question. People, you got to watch out for your women asking the wrong questions. What if I look stupid? What if this other person feels bad because I got this spot on the team? Which is a considerate question, but maybe not the place of ultimate focus.
Confrontation and humiliation do not work.
Here's another model trasher.
So, I would imagine with all the men that we have in the room, you've played sports. And I'm curious to know how the first time you coached women, how quickly they cried. Right? And you're like, I don't know what to do. They're going to cry, I can tell you. It's just going to happen sometimes. You don't have to get worked up about it. You don't have to, push away from it. Just let them get it out and then move on. And I'm not saying all women cry. That would be horrible if you said that, wouldn't it? Oh, we'd be such a sexist. Right?
Exactly. You say things I can say. Keep saying things I can say.
But confrontation and humiliation, absolutely. This is not going to work.
I don't know how much elaboration that requires. If you tell some, in some way, shape, or form, whether it's with your words or if it comes out the texture of your skin, if you tell someone they're a piece of crap, they'll agree with you. And then they'll live up to that characterization somehow. Because one of two things happens. You rain fire on somebody, and typically, here's the thing. It may come from a place of concern, even love on your part. It's like, for those of you who are parents, for the rest of you who've seen kids on TV, you're going to know what I'm talking about here. If you see your kid riding and starting to wobble on their bicycle, and they're coming around a manhole cover, whoop, they hit the crack of it, and down they go. You start to feel it in your stomach. And down they go. And there is a wiring that happens between parent and child, but I'll also argue between any relationship that's super close. Okay? That your stomach tightens, it's like, that's my kid. And you can, in the connection, the tuning fork goes off in you. And when we feel that way, sometimes it's so uncomfortable, you'll yell at your kid, whom you love beyond measure. What are you doing? Taking the training wheels off! Wah! And the kid's sort of braided backwards. It may have come from a place just of being connected and fearful of hurt. And sometimes with your athletes, you can love them to pieces, and it's like you threw the wrong ball. You didn't know it was plastic? Or whatever it is. It's, sorry. The jury will disregard what just happened.
Wasn't me.
Right. We can't undo this. So, but one of two things will happen. You're wired to respond to your athlete. And because it is women, oftentimes the level of, and I'll say this in the safest, best way, the level of intimacy is more connected. And because of that, you'll get more emotionally activated when the person you're in a relationship with, hopefully, has a rough time. But your insistence can come out in ways that are injurious. Blow people back. And men, I think I can speak for them a little. We do this sometimes reflexively, particularly if it worked with us. But it's a different deal when all you're doing for the woman you're working with is reflecting her own self-hate in that moment. It's to be cautious here. How is that?
That was great. The next slide says, voice and body language matter. Girls often can't separate your tone from your message. So even if you say, we did this earlier, it's okay. All they hear is, it's not okay. Shake it off, it's fine, don't worry about it. It's not.
Everyone completely blows when sometimes it's okay. I thought that was okay. At the end of the day, whatever you are, it does have to be authentic. And you've got to get your act straight first because you're going to be wired to respond to your athlete, particularly your female athlete.
Girls yearn for approval, fairness, equity, and respect are important. How much is it? You're just not being fair. I don't know if you guys have heard that. It's not fair, coach. I don't understand. It's exhausting. But at the same time, so I'm going to back up there for a second.
Well,
We may.
move on.
All right. Changes influenced by relationship.
We've been talking about this whole time. I don't even know that there's more to add in this moment. Your coaching is about your relationship. If it was about what you know, this would be superfluous. There'd be no reason for it. Just read more, learn more, study more, and disseminate it. But it all comes in the vehicle of all this stuff. Seeking approval isn't awful. It's, we're designed for it. And they're going to want yours, too. But if all you're doing is dumping down, then everybody would be bowling better. It's interesting. I was bowling league of all things, and my coach in Reno came by, and I got all nervous. And I was like, oh man, we've been working on this stuff. I want to show that I can do it. And I threw like this horrible shot, of course, because I was afraid that he would think I wasn't listening, wasn't paying attention, wasn't doing any of the right stuff. I came back. I thought, well, I'll tell the truth. I said, you showed up, and I was so nervous playing in front of you. You're the only person in this whole place that I care what he thinks. And there you were behind me. And he started laughing. He goes, it's really funny. He goes, you're the only person in this place that I care about. He said, go play. And it was all free. He said, you're going to miss them sometimes. If that's the criterion for us hanging out together, we got to get off that right now. He actually verbally, it was that clear. He said, making your shots is a requirement for being together. We got to get off that. Just bring what you got. You're the only one here I care about. That's what he said to me. Felt real. And I can play in front of him now.
I think if you do, if you want to connect with your women's team, if you want success for your women's team, you have to be willing to connect with them. You have to be willing to go outside of what you do naturally and be different with them because they require something different. And Del touched on it earlier. It's like a good coach tailors their, what do I want to say, their delivery to what the player needs and wants to hear. I have to be different when I'm with Tommy. I'm not the same with Tommy Jones as I am with Shannon O'Keefe. You have to be willing to change based on what your player needs and how they learn.
Start with the bottom and then read the top two.
I'll read it for those who can't see it. Your athlete will fill in the blank space with her fears, anxieties, and concerns. At the top, women need an explanation as to how they fit in and how they will be used. And if they don't like what's happening,
That has to be the sign that we're overtime
we're
or
in trouble. I
something.
know, we're in trouble.
And they understood it's on silent.
Fire Richard.
Tell them what they can do to change their role if they don't like it.
People fill in blank space with their fears, and particularly if it's you and them, you and your female athlete. If you're making some change, those of you who have teams, if you're leaving her out of the lineup, if you've moved her from anchor to lead off, if anything, if you've given them a weaker ball. Now you know it's because the lanes are a little thin, you need something that's going to go longer. They know you see them as they have no power in their game and that's what has to happen, or something. What you don't fill in, they will, and they will tend to interpret down as opposed to up.
Question?
Well, I just wanted to make a comment. With my team, I'm 17 years doing women's teams, and they'd throw a shot and I'd shake my head. And one day, one of them came up, "Are you disappointed?" I said, "No, I felt like your shot should have made it, and I was disappointed that you didn't get it because I felt like you should." So it shows how they will automatically assume you are upset with them. And you've got to reassure them that it's not them you thought they should have had.
Paid her to say that, by the way.
I just like to compliment the couple over here, the father and daughter. If any coach wants to learn how to coach girls, coach their daughter.
Yeah.
I coached my daughter from the time she was 7 years old, and I did even both. The gremlins in the neighborhood, as I call them, needed to bowl. They needed a coach. I was working for UPS, flying all over. My daughter said, "Well, you're here every other weekend, Daddy, so you're going to coach us?" I said, "I don't even know." She's 7 years old. She said, "When you make me go to school, you go to school." That was 35 years ago. She kept me in coaching. She taught me how to relate, because there's nothing happens that you got one daughter that's a all-state basketball and
Let me
softball.
step in for a second, because you're talking about something pretty tricky, actually, given that I can't even teach my son to drive without one of us going out the window. So it sort of goes to Dell's question earlier, which is how do we keep our role distinctions right? And I agree with you. Your contact with your kids will teach you a lot. I don't even know how much to comment on this. We're so close to the end of time. So I have a slightly different point of view, which is coach your kids. It's how many of us get into Saturday morning leagues. But it's tricky business. Fraught with potholes, because the meaning of what happens from dad or mom is 5 times amplified of what happens with coach. And so we'll take the same thing, we'll take everything we put up there and we'll amplify it by 5. Does that another comment?
Yeah, I coached my daughter. She's, 8 years
old. I was coaching other girls and other boys. I was not mom, I was a coach. So if she's playing out the phone or doing anything else, go wait in the car, I'm coaching. So I didn't take that role.
Actually, go wait in the car is being a mom.
Well, all right, okay, take that role. She's not disrupting what I'm doing. I'm not gonna let it go on.
Tricky role distinctions, and we still have tricky role distinctions. You know, next time there's a, you know, the one or two women's tournaments now that are available to bowl, we have a different conversation still, and have to make that distinction between the friendship and the relationship. Yeah.
Finish quickly. It was very positive, success. She went to Ohio State University, where she came home and had me come in and help coach the girls. It was a success.
All right.
And that's the same daughter that I always get your signature for. But she's still bowling in Detroit. Gets all her bowling balls in Showdown. She's very close. We're very close. So it's a positive story. I'm just saying, congratulations. That's what I was trying to get to.
Awesome. We're huge fans of happy endings.
I pushed for this one because I thought it was important. Everyone doesn't necessarily get treated the same way, because I'm not sure that's possible, but everyone has to be treated fairly. Moreover, they have to know and trust that they will be treated fairly. Fairness is big. Men and women, it really is just big. It's got to be the cornerstone of your program. You have to find a way to be fair to all your players.
I think this is a gender distinction. You'd say, guy, who told you life was going to be fair? And they'll go, nobody. My little league coach told me it wasn't, and that's why I wasn't in the lineup. All right. Don't you try to crack that up with one of your female athletes? And who told you life was supposed to be fair? They'll give you a list of who said it. Again, blank space has to be filled.